Good evening. I think if I talk very loudly for 2 hours, probably will run out of voice. So I would, if you can't hear me, please come forward and maybe we'll be a little bit more closer and all of us will hear fine. If you're hearing okay, then that's fine. I met Jean last year and we were actually doing with public television a documentary about teens that I'll show you the link to if you haven't seen it. It was a really well done stuff that PBS did, and you know their work and our work and all of you who care about teens, essentially. Where do I come from? So I started my professional life as a gynecologist. Then at some point I figured that I'm doing things, I'm very good at it, but I'm not thinking enough sometimes because it's becoming routine. So I stopped and went and did 4 years of fellowship in basic science research in physiology. So I became a physiologist. Then I figured that when I was an obstetrician, whenever something went wrong, we blamed the pediatricians, and the pediatricians blamed the obstetricians. So I thought I'm going to do pediatrics. I became a pediatrician. And while I'm working as a pediatrician, I figured that, is this better or worse? Okay. I figured that in the whole concept of pediatrics, I really don't know how to talk to teens. I had a mentor who was 76 years old and has worked 44 years with teens. And I'll go see a patient, you know, a teenage patient, spend an hour in the room and come out with nothing. She'll go there 2 minutes, get more information than I got in an hour. So that created a new challenge for me. I decided I will do specialty in adolescent medicine, which is dealing with teens. And so I did that and figured out this is my calling. This is the one thing that I feel really good about, because as an obstetrician, yeah, it's great. I can deliver babies, and then every time I do hysterectomy in an 8-year-old with ovarian cancer, and I feel actually bad, not worse, because I prolonged her suffering for a month or two. I didn't really do a huge difference in her life. And the newborn, those tiny babies that would deliver at 20 weeks, and okay, we deliver them alive, but how will they do in life? I didn't feel good about that either. But with teens, there is nothing like it. You have a 15-year-old who is on the crossroads between becoming a drug addict or a suicide or killing somebody or getting pregnant if she's a female. And your intervention or my interaction with this patient makes the difference between them becoming productive adults or the end of their life or the end of their good life at least, or getting into more trouble. And that lasts forever. Yeah, there is nothing like, I have patients who I've been seeing for 17, 18 years. They go to college, they get married, and then they still call me every day or every month or every year, depending what they need. They still come to the clinic if they come to the state. If not, they use email. I get maybe 300-400 emails per day from young people, which all my colleagues think I'm crazy, but this is lifeline for these teens. And we'll talk about that. Why is that important and why it is not? Obviously, some politicians will think I'm a terrorist and will kick me out of the country just because of my name, but I am a citizen, and maybe that will keep me here for a while. So what I want to start with is that most grown-ups, most adults, every one of us always thinks, oh, when I was a teenager, we were better than our teenagers today, right? All of you will think that way, that you did things differently. You were more, but if you really are really honest and go back and think, you'll find that you are doing the same things that your teen kids are doing today. It's just maybe your parents communicated better with you or your teachers communicated better. So I went back and researched this throughout history. And here's what I found, that 3,000 years ago, Plato said there, the son feels equal to his father, he has no respect for his parents, students insult their teachers. On top of this, and in the name of liberty, sex is everywhere. Can you, if I remove the dates, you will think that somebody said this yesterday, not 3,000 years ago. So the reality is 3,000 years ago, they thought the same thing about their teens. And it's not just that. Any time you look in history, this is Shakespeare. I don't know if you can read this, but it says, I wish that there were no age between 10 and 23. He wants everybody to go to sleep at 10, wakes up at 23, so he can avoid that. This is one of my favorites, which is Mark Twain always put things in funny way and humoristic ways. Oh, when I was a boy of 14, my father was so ignorant I could hardly stand to have the old man around. But when I got to 21, I was astonished how much the old man has learned in the 7 years, right? So it isn't you, it's every generation thinks that teens from previous generations were different, or we are different than that teen. The fact is, in any generation, be it 5,000 years ago or 5,000 years from now, humans will go through the same process, which is called puberty. And it is the longest puberty among all primates. It lasts more than 4 years. And that's the physical changes, the puberty itself. The adolescence, which is the mental process, that can last a lifetime. I see people who are at age 80 still are teenagers or thinking like that. So the biological process in adolescence and the psychosocial changes that happen with it, they're independent, but they still go together at the same time. It is not unusual to see a teen who's physically developed at age, say, 12 or 13, looks like an adult. And he's still developing his psychosocial mind, so they don't have to go at the same speed, and they practically never do. One of the most common things due to all kinds of factors is the ladies here remember that usually we started having menstrual periods around age between 12 and 14. The average age for starting menstrual periods was 12 and a half in the US up to 20 years ago. Well, now it's down to about 10 and a half. And so if in 1990, if you brought me your daughter who was 10 and starting breast development, we would have called her precocious puberty. Now we call it normal. It is not unusual. If somebody menstruates at age 8, 8 and a half, so be it. We don't do anything about it. And this is change. This is physical change that happened during that time. If you look at maybe 200 years ago, the average age of menstruation was about 15. Nutrition has changed, the exposure to social media and science and brain stimulation with all the things that are going around us have changed. So both of those things, the physical change and the mental change or the psychosocial change, happen at a rapid pace. They're not slow, even though it's 4 years sounds like a long time, but it's not a long time. It's constant change. In any time something going fast, it's like if you're taking a sharp turn at 35 or 55 miles an hour. If you're moving really fast, you're more likely to crash, more likely to be hurt one way or the other. And that's why during the teen years, anything that changes within that structure will cause problems. So during puberty, there is hormones that are changing, both boys and girls. There is brain structure that is changing, and that contributes to what kind of psychology this kid is going to develop. And I think if you don't remember anything from tonight, this is what I like people to remember, it is always what we adults view as a problem, most teens view as a solution. And nobody wants their solutions to be taken away from them. What does that mean? It sounds confusing, but let's put yourself in the shoes of a, say, 15-year-old who is going out with 4 or 5 friends. So the other 4 friends want to smoke pot, and he doesn't. What is his problem? His problem is not smoking pot in his mind. What's the easiest solution? Smoke pot and join the group, right? This is how the teenage mind thinks. So in his mind, he had a problem, he found a solution, and then we are all on his case. Why did he do that, right? So we confuse these kids when we start, okay, you did this. Well, we didn't talk to him about it before, and that's where our biggest mistake as a society is. If we prepare our kids for what happened, what could happen, let's say with my own son around age 7 and 8, we started talking about these things, how to get away from situations with other teens or peer pressure. And when he was 12, he came one day at home and said, you know, what we were talking about, this just happened today. And I told him I had asthma, and if I do something, I'll get better. He just came up with it. But he was prepared to come up with an answer. And that's what we need to do. We can't wait until our kids get into trouble. And this is the biggest difference between the US, by the way, and most other countries in the civilized world, is that we wait always to react to something. We don't do anything till there is massive school shooting, then, oh, what do we do about it? Why didn't we do about it before it happens? It's the same on the personal level, your kid and my kid. If we prepare them ahead of time, if we talk to them, and I'll show you why in many other aspects. But what happened here? Oh, okay. It didn't disappear. So anyway, this is really the most important concept that we need to understand. So when we talk to our kids when they get in trouble, instead of just yelling at them, we should understand what led them, that in that particular case, they were trying to find a solution. And we should give them that solution in the future, what to do in this case or any other case. And we have to remember that this is a time when there is constant change. Puberty or the physical change is the foundation to it, but then cognition, how to develop thinking process, you know, how long do they grow, how much every teenager is asking how many inches I'm gonna gain, and how tall I'm gonna be, and how short, and things like that. The hormone changes, and they start feeling weird feelings that they didn't know before. Of course, now with the social media and electronics, when I was in the early 60s, a teen, and at that time we didn't even have a radio, let aside smartphones and anything like that. So many things they know about, but they know about from the wrong sources. So these are the type of things that change. The other thing that we learned over the last few years is that we used to think that most people finish their brain development by somewhere 18, 19. But now we know that that's not true, that actually the average age of completion of brain development structure is about 24. And this is science. This is not, that's the other problem, is none of our teachers or parents or politicians use the science. Guess who is using it? If you have thought about this, the rental car companies. That's the only place that they use the age. They did not pick 25 as an arbitrary age for not rent, right? You can't rent if you're under 25, especially male. And that's the reason. They did their studies, they looked at the science. Oh, my car is not coming back if we rent him to this kid. So this is what we need to learn, is science is not our enemy. And that reminds me that West Virginia yesterday passed a law to ban teaching science in some schools because maybe the teachers will teach the kids about climate change. So the more anti-science we are, the worse we get. It's not helping anybody. It's good to have a debate, and maybe you agree with it or disagree with it, but if it is proven science, like this is proven science. Now we have PET scans that actually look at the brain. Is it completely developed or not? And if it is not completely developed, you're still having issues. And what happens is, over time, you know, from birth until later on, if the red areas have more gray matter and the blue areas are white matter. And this is what happens when the brain comes closer to maturity, is more and more white matter, and then small centers of gray matter stay in the brain. And why is that important is really this. Basically, this is the area in the brain that's responsible for decision making. And that area is the one that's the last to develop. So it is not coincidental that some 18-year-old or 19-year-old or 16-year-old cannot make very good decisions. They don't think about consequences the same way a 27-year-old or a 29-year-old would. And until that area is completely developed, we'll always have those problems. And if a society confuses those kids, which we do, we are very good at that here. You know, like in some states, a 13-year-old can stand trial and sentenced to death. my son got a pilot license at 16, 6 months before he got his driver's license. He can do that. He can go join the army and drive a tank or fly a jet fighter at 17, 18. He can vote at 18, but he cannot have a beer until 21. And look at that whole picture. It's very confusing to our kids. What is more dangerous? Iowa yesterday, the state of Iowa, passed a law yesterday in the House to allow kids under 14 to carry handguns. Now, that state requires a license if you want to braid your hair. The people who do hair braiding has to obtain a license. That is more dangerous than a 13-year-old with a gun. So those are the type of things that influence what happens with our kids. How do they develop and what society they do. Because everything depends. If we want to protect our kids, if our kids are going to do fine, these are the things that help. If we teach them social skills, if they, teach them the ability to interact with adults and have positive interaction with adults. If they believe in something, doesn't matter what religion or whatever belief, just something that they actually believe in. If they have, participation in school, on athletics, or they're doing well in school, where their, self-worth is there, they believe in themselves, then they are likely on the individual level to be more successful. On the family level, connectedness to a parent. It's either both parents or one parent. We published many studies in Kentucky, especially in rural areas, comparing kids who are, I can tell you there are a couple of counties in the state where roughly 80% of the kids don't have two parents. And they're raised by a foster parent, a boyfriend, distant cousin, a grandparent, a foster parent. There's a huge difference in the outcome between those who have involvement, not necessarily living together, but both biological parents involved or not. It makes a huge difference. If you have access to extended family, if you can't talk to your parents, but there is an uncle, an aunt, somebody else that you can talk to. If kids are spaced at least 2 years apart. Now, I tell you, I have this family. The young lady is 31 years old, has 6 kids from 6 different men. How do you expect these kids to do fine? It doesn't matter what we do, the rest of the society or those kids themselves. It's not the kids' problem. We created that. No teenager wakes up in the morning and thinks, I'm going to be bad today. It's what we do to them that makes them what they are, good or bad. So what does the parent expectation and values? If that's important, that makes the kid more likely to listen. Even when they are not listening, they still hear you. They watch you. They see. If you don't ever lock your seat belt, they're not going to use their seat belt. It doesn't matter what you do. You can tell them all the time, put your seat belt on, but you don't do it yourself, they're going to follow your footsteps. On the society level, does the kid have somebody else to talk to? A non-parent, a teacher, a school counselor, a priest, anybody that they can talk to, an adult, that if they are in trouble or they feel they need help. Do they belong to a social institution, whatever that is, that can help them? Is there an after-school program? Is there an adult supportive in the school? If you go back and look at the data from 1993 to about 1999, that was the best time in teen outcomes in the US. And one direct reason for that was we had 5,000 after-school programs around the country, where most kids, when they didn't have a parent, they didn't have anybody to help after 3 when school got out, they had something useful to do. Then, of course, that was too expensive for our politicians, even though it cost less than a fraction of 1% of what they give in tax revenue for, say, oil companies. But we closed all those. And now our kids, that's, if you look at the data, again, between 3 and 6 is the most common time that kids get in trouble. There's no school, there's nobody at home. So everything else is open. A lot of things have changed over the years, and that's why we keep thinking that our teens today are different. It's not our teens are different, it's the things that changed that made them different. There is lots of social forces that have changed, like Families used to, well, you're born somewhere, you grow up there, then you go to college, come back and work in the same place. You're in the same area or the same state. Now it's extremely rare to find that. Somebody's born in Kentucky, goes to college in wherever, Ohio, then ends up in California or Arizona, and there's a constant uprooting of that kid from the surrounding, from the adults or the friends or the peers that he has to. Maybe all of you remember just 30 years ago, if you lived in a neighborhood, you practically knew everyone. I live in the same place now 17 years. I don't know anybody, none of the neighbors. There are 12 houses on that street. And I know their faces or their cars, but we never stopped to talk to each other. That didn't happen 30 years ago. People stopped and talked and said hi and what's going on and how's the kids doing and things like that. A lot of parents are working and they don't come back and they don't interact with the kids, or when they do come back, they're on their phone or watching TV instead of talking to their kids. Again, when I was in school, I knew every kid in school. When my son went to high school, they had 2,000 kids, and they did not even take the same classes with the same kids. Now, it depends what classes you are taking. You can be with this kid in this class and that kid. So you don't really know many of the people. And then, of course, the exposure to all the things that we were not exposed to just by virtue of technology changes. There's the media and all kinds of media outlets. All right? Then there is a lot of neighborhoods are deteriorating either because of economy or for drug use or drug trade or anything like that. There is a lot of multicultural environment and lots of competition going between the kids or between the adults that's interacting with these kids. So what all this is showing is we are seeing more and more social insecurity among kids, the relationship problem. They don't trust us. They don't trust the adults. They feel excluded or marginalized. A lot of antisocial or immoral norms, depending what your morals are. There's a lot of violence and anger problems or poor anger management, poor learning skill, and capacity building, feeling disempowered, lots of impulsive stuff that we didn't see before. Because again, 40 or 30 years ago, if I got in trouble, and instead of doing something impulsive, I'm talking to my older brother or my neighbor or my dad or my uncle or my neighbor or somebody. And now most of our kids don't really have anybody, so they feel really low self-esteem, poor self-regard. And what all this does is leading to things that we shouldn't be looking at. This is what causes death in the US. If you look at adults, you have cardiovascular disease and cancer and others. If you look at teens, car accidents, homicides, suicide. By the way, in 2013, this overtook homicide. So suicide is the second leading cause of death in the US now. Other unintentional injuries are everything that teens do, like eating disorders, accidental shootings, drug use, teen pregnancy, all those things. So if I want to sum this up, about 95%, like out of 100 teens that die, only 5 will die from disease, from something that happens to them. Only 5. 95 will die from something that they do or they're exposed to. That means 95, in theory, can be prevented. But to do that, I'm sure we cannot prevent all of them, but we can do a lot better than what we are doing now. I put this just to show how much we don't know. If you think about it, very few of you, if any, had ever thought that suicide kills more than all wars combined. Right? Did anybody think of this data? This is true data from the World Health Organization, and you can look it up. So over the last 40 years, suicide had killed more or equal to all homicides and all wars combined. Yeah, we talk so much about war, and we should. But there's something killing, in the US every year, 33,000 people die from suicide. That's 87 persons every single day. Now think if we have a passenger plane with 87 passengers crashing every day, we probably think about doing something about it. But we know that 87 people are going to die from suicide every single day, and we don't do much about it. On the contrary, we do everything to increase it. You know, there is no parity in mental health. We don't treat people. We don't do prevention. Most insurance will not even pay for treatment for somebody who needs it. So the biggest change, though, that made our teens today different is the electronic media. What happened with electronic use. All our kids use iPads and cell phones and computers and all that. And as good as that is, it has also a bad part of it. The majority of teens now prefer texting to talking. I interview applicants for medical school. And in the last 10 years or so, I'm afraid people will forget how to talk anymore. This year, everyone I interviewed, I did not pass. And I told them, I cannot, with good conscience, say that you can be a physician. If you cannot talk, how are you going to get a history from a patient? Because they talk in text language. They can't put a real sentence together. And this is happening. And this is how evolution happens. The more you do the same thing over and over, that's when you forget how to do it. And so this is what is happening to most of our kids. And what is that creating is creating new problems that we didn't have before, like cyberbullying. You know, and I'll talk a lot more about that, with, you know, bullying without having to be face-to-face. Sleep. Our kids are not sleeping enough. And we'll talk, what does that mean also? Using this media for sexting or using sexual language in text and sexual victimization of others. Internet addiction. This is a disease. It's been a disease for 11 years. The European Union put 64 million euros in 2003 to study that and to see what we can do about it. I helped them as a consultant, and we did studies in 9 different countries. And I can tell you, all civilized European countries, Western Europe, Scandinavian countries, all of them have inpatient units for internet addiction. We could not get the DMS-5 or diagnostic criteria here to even classify it as a disease, because if they do, then insurance companies has to pay for it. And of course, insurance companies lobbied against that. So now it's listed as excess internet use in the US, while in other countries and it is addiction. It has the same withdrawal symptoms, the same like if you are just stopped using heroin or morphine. Watch some of these kids if you take away their phone. They'll start shaking and sweating, and there are physical symptoms and mental symptoms, and it is something we need to address. We can't address it by running away from. More widespread things like inhalant use, and I'll talk about a lot of these things just to go over. So this is just a list. So there are a lot of digital stressors going on among our kids that didn't exist before, like impersonation. Anybody can pretend to be anybody else. And there is no way for you to tell unless you are a computer genius. Many times, anybody can steal your email and use it to email somebody else, or phone and text somebody else and do things like that. Receiving mean and harassing personal attacks, public shaming and humiliation. I mean, just the simplest thing. One of my anorexic patients, somebody in her school put a picture of skeleton on Facebook and put her name on it. It might sound like a joke, but you can put yourself in her shoes. How did she feel like when everybody the next day is looking at her and talking and things like that? So it's very easy to do. This wasn't easy to do before. Breaking into devices and accounts, pressure to comply. I texted you, why didn't you answer? It's like you have to. And this is my definition of addiction. The difference between I want to use something or I'm addicted to is I want to answer your text. I have to answer your text. I want to look at Facebook for 5 minutes, or I have to be on Facebook for the next 6 hours. Once it becomes I have to, that's already a disease. It's already out of your control. You can't control when you can, and this is something you have to be in charge of, not it is in charge of you. All right, so some of Some of the things that really makes me understand teens is when a mom brings her kid to the clinic, and I can't get her to stop looking at the phone for a second to tell me what the problem is. How does she expect, or I'm not saying just women and men do the same. How does she or he expect their kid to be any different? Kids look at us, what we do. So it's a good idea for parents to be role models on this, to know when to not use the phone. When you just came back from work and your kid just came back from school, spend a few minutes with them instead of going on your phone immediately. Make a rule that no phone use at mealtime. While you're driving your kid to school or back, nothing is that you lived without cell phone 10 years ago or 20 years ago. You can still live like that driving your kid to school. I personally, I never take a phone call while I'm driving, no matter what, even though I know it could be an emergency. And if I see the number, it's from the hospital, I'll pull over and take the call because just this is how I am or how I want it to be. And I don't think it is that hard if we set our mind to it. So we'll go back now to all these things. Cyberbullying. And the difference between cyberbullying is essentially that you can do it without being in a physical proximity to the victim. Anybody can bully anybody on the electronic media, either through texting or Facebook posting or anything like that. Approximately 20 to 40% of our kids are being victimized this way. It equally affects males and females, while the old-fashioned bullying was mostly against females. Now both are affected the same. And the worst part is around 7th and 8th grade. If you look at national data, you can see that by 8th grade, roughly 1 in 4 of our kids is constantly being cyberbullied. And that is a big number. If you look at Kentucky, middle school students reported, almost half of them reported being bullied on school property, and about 29% electronically. So it is a massive problem in our state, and we have to really start working on it, and we're not doing enough. If you look again at data from 2011 Youth Risk Behavior Survey, and you can see females, males, white, black, Hispanic, everybody is being victimized through cyberbullying. So we need to talk to our kids about it and talk about it before they hit 5th and 6th grade, because that's when it gets the worst. So while they're still in 7, 6, 7, 8 years old, we need to start talking to them about them. And one of the biggest things is we need to emphasize that never meet someone in person that you met online alone. That should never happen. It's 99% of the time, it's a dangerous zone. Less than 1% is going to be legitimate. So that's one thing you can tell your kids all the time about it. And you need to remind your kids that whatever they do today, at age 12 or 13, it's going to come back to haunt them when they go to college, because you can't delete anything. Whatever you searched on the internet, whatever you posted on Facebook, you can delete it, but it's not gone. It's there. And I'll tell you that every respected college in the country right now, that's one of the things they look at when applicants do. Same thing with companies when they hire. They will go and look up all your electronic footprints. That porn site you visited when you were 11, it's still there. And that cyberbullying text that you sent to someone, it's still there. And they will make judgments about you getting a scholarship or not, or getting a job or not, based on that. So we need to talk to our kids about that. Don't assume that you do something and you delete it, it's gone. Nothing is gone. What does cyberbullying do? The kids who are victim to cyberbullying will have academic problems, will have start thinking that school is unsafe. They will start skipping school, more likely to carry a weapon to school. A lot of them will go into depression or social anxiety and low self-esteem. Lots of them will have physical symptoms. And you have this kid who's 12 or 13 who is always having headaches or belly aches, and every time you take them to the emergency room or to the doctor, and they do all kinds of studies, and there is nothing there, nothing physical. This is one of those things. They are not lying. They are actually having these symptoms because our brain and body are attached. And if your brain is suffering, your body is going to suffer. So you can have vomiting, and you have belly ache, and you can have headache because of those things. So if you see your kid is more sad or angry than usual, especially after they go online, if they show withdrawal from activities, if they start being scared to go to school or wanting to carry a weapon to school, ask about those things. Chances are they are being bullied. All right, the other thing is sleep. A normal adolescent needs about 9 hours of sleep up to age 18, then 8.5. I can tell you almost none of our teens now are getting that. You think your kid went to his room and you took the TV alone, but you forgot his cell phone. And cell phone is like a computer. They're there until 3 or 4 in the morning. They're getting 2-3 hours of sleep. So when they do that, then they can't recover. Our brains need that rest. And I don't want to go into too much science, but something throughout history or throughout evolution where when it got dark, we went to sleep because there was no electricity or lights. And so our brains automatically around 2 in the morning dump some, the hormones that actually stimulate our thyroid and our adrenals and our ovaries and testicles. And when that is disrupted, all that is disrupted. So it doesn't work right because now you're making those hormones around 10 in the morning or 6 in the morning, and then your afternoon is different and your morning is different. And then what we see, I can tell you, half of the kids that are referred to my clinic with ADHD don't have ADHD. They're just nuts. All I do is take them off their medications and tell them, okay, go to sleep on time. Let's see after 2 weeks of sleeping 8.5 to 9 hours how things are. Because if you didn't sleep, how do you expect to perform in school? How do you pay attention or focus? It won't, even as an adult. Think about it. If you go 5-6 days of sleeping only 3-4 hours of night sleep, how are you going to feel driving 5 hours the next day or something? It's the same, doesn't change. And that also causes excessive daytime sleepiness. And that translates into depression, irritability, academic failures, impulsivity, again, ADHD type stuff, and a lot of car accidents. I mean, teenagers are not good drivers to start with, and if they haven't gotten enough sleep, they're more likely to crash. So all those things tie in together. It's not a separate thing. There are a lot of things. I wanted to show a few things that you may have forgotten about. They always existed, but now with the electronic media are coming with a vengeance. One is what the kids call huffing. I'm sure all of you are familiar with that. Basically, it's inhaling anything around the household to get high. And everything in your household can do the job. And that is fairly common because it's any chemical. And a lot of kids will mix 2-3 of them together. The problem with this is those can kill you the first time you use them, even though they're household items. If you put 5-6 chemicals together and you inhale them, we don't know. First, there is no test for these. If you do a tox screen on anybody, it doesn't include spray paint and glue and whipped cream gas and things like that. Those are things that don't show up on any test. Every month at UK, we get 1 to 2 teens in a coma, and nobody can figure out why. And usually this is the cause. They did something that caused that coma, but there is no test for it. So this is, and it can cause death, again, from death or coma or brain damage from first use. If it is, we shouldn't be saying that, but I'd rather a kid experiment with marijuana or even harder drug than this, because at least we know how to test for the others and what to do about them. We don't know anything about this. Most of the time, we get these kids already dead or in a coma. Or this is a young 15-year-old that was a straight-A student who took, I don't know what you call it, this dust it, the thing that you use, the spray that you use to clean screens and keyboards and things. This is actually similar to liquid nitrogen. So when you spray it, it freezes anything that it falls on. And this is what she did. You actually see the outside. This is like third-degree frostbite, which is awful. But what you don't see is that her entire throat was gone, like her larynx, her trachea. She survived, but the rest of her life she will have a feeding tube and a trach, to breathe from. And most of the time, we won't be able to save them. By the time we get them, they're already gone. So this is just a simple example. And the sad part is Most of those kids who do this are what we call good kids. These are the kids who, I don't want to use drugs, but this is legal, this is in the house, this is not drugs. So if we don't tell them that, if we don't talk to them earlier, this is what's going to happen. And it starts as early as age 5. So this is not something you can afford to wait until your kid is 16 to talk to them about. You have to start telling them these things early and explain safety issues about chemicals around the house. And as you can see, it's more than 1 in 10 kids are using that at very early age. The other thing is any name you pick, it's the choking game or whatever name you want to do, okay? And this is another thing that kids do to get high. It is different than what adults do to have sexual gratification. This really among teens has nothing to do with that. They do it to get high. And basically what it is it's not a game because it can kill you from the first time you do it. And what they do is cut the blood flow to their brain, either wrap something or a belt or a rope around their neck or have another kid squeeze their necks until the blood flow stops. A normal brain can tolerate somewhere between 4 and 5 minutes without oxygen. But nobody knows when you're going to lose consciousness. So some people lose consciousness in 2 minutes and some in 4 minutes. So there is no prediction. And that's usually what kills them. They tie a rope. They think, when I start getting dizzy enough, I'll stop. But before they stop, they already lost consciousness, and then their weight pulls them down, and they're dead. And the other, even, some will say, well, if I'm with another kid, it's safer. It's not, because the other kid is not a doctor either. He wouldn't know when something is going to happen or go bad. And the thing is, this is something that is twice high to them. When they cut the flow, they get dizzy. And for teens, they think, well, if I get dizzy, that's high. That's like when you drink alcohol and you get dizzy, it means getting high. Then when they release that, a rush of adrenaline comes back and they feel another high. So that's why they do it. The sad part, again, is that this is a very young age, 9 to 16-year-old. Boys and girls are doing it equally. Usually, they are, again, the same good kids, the high achievers, the straight-A students, the good athletes who don't want to do drugs. And we as parents are, oh, our kid is great. He's all straight-A student, and he doesn't go out and do things like, well, yeah, but do you know what else is going on? Do you hear sudden movements, sudden things going on at home? So do you see some bulging eyes or redness in the eye frequently in this kid? There are a lot of symptoms. I can't go over all those things, but you have to notice if anything is different with your kid than usual. And again, when we ask them, they say, well, we do it because it's cool, because, the other issue is when you do this, our brain's defensive mechanism, usually to any pain or oxygen deprivation, is to dump something called endorphin. And endorphins are essentially morphine. So the more you do this, the more you need to do it because you are becoming addicted to it. You need a higher dose, just like if you're using morphine. So the more frequently they do this, the more the need they have to do it even more frequently. And it becomes more and more addictive. And again, they think that this is safe. It is not an illegal drug, but it is not. So everybody is really at risk. Any kid, boys and girls, 9 to 16, high achievers, athletes, anybody, it can happen to anybody. I'll show you even some pictures. And this is if you look at the data. This used to be classified as suicide. Every time they found a kid hanging or something and they said it's suicide, because the coroners didn't even know that. And we had to work for years and years to educate people, no, you have to look for other signs. And now we know a little bit more. And if you look up to, say, age 15, actually, there are more deaths by the choking game than suicide. And then later it changes. Because now we can identify that. At least most coroners, most forensic pathologists can look for broken blood vessels in the eyes and things like that that can give them indication that this has been done over a long period of time. It's not just the first time. Although it can kill them the first time and then we are done. And these are, like I said, these are like your kid and my kid. Any kid can go there. I know a lot of families who lost their kids. And none of them ever suspected anything or thought about their kid being, addicted to this thing and dying at this young age for no particular reason. All right? So the other problem is, what is the mental status of our kids? And we keep underestimating that. In reality, about 1 in 3 of our, 28, 9%, 30%, almost 1 in 3 of our kids feel sad or hopeless. That's basically what you call depression in adults. About 15, 16% of our kids have seriously considered suicide. That's 1 in 6. So if each 6 parents here, one of your kids is thinking that, it's not, it won't happen to me, because everybody thinks it won't happen to me. Those who made plans, again, 12.8%. That's roughly 1 in 8 kids have already made plans to commit suicide. And then actual attempt, 8%. That's 1 in 12 kids actually attempted suicide or has tried to kill themselves. Okay, so this is a completely different topic. We can talk days about suicide. I have been doing suicide prevention unfunded for 17 years now. And we do a conference every year. It's going to be November 4th this year in Lexington, where we talk about all teen issues, but the primary focus is preventing suicide. I've dealt with about 20,000 kids who are suicidal in this time. And it is always the same story. They just need somebody to talk to. Most of the suicides in teens have nothing to do with mental health. It's what we call same-day suicide. Something happens, he doesn't have a mom or a dad or a neighbor or a teacher to talk to, and thinks that the world is over. So 30% of all suicides are that, same-day suicide. Not, they never had a mental health problem, never had depression, never had anything like that. And that's why prevention is the key. It's not waiting for something to happen and then we start treatment, because by then it's too late. The vampire culture, I don't know how much you hear about it. This was the first thing I saw when I came to Kentucky. In 1988, if any of you was watching the news, of course, at that time you didn't have internet, much of that, but the news was in eastern Kentucky. There was this group of so-called vampires. This was their leader. And they got caught because this was the extreme. This group was the extreme. Not only they got to drinking blood, but they started actually cannibalizing people. They would get these girls with them pregnant so they can have babies to eat after that. I mean, it was, I first thought, I arrived here, I remember October 26, 98, and the next day was on the news, and I thought, what the hell am I doing to myself? Why did I came here? Anyhow, this was the extreme. Then it started slowing down, this culture. But then the vampire movies, the Twilight movies came across, and all of a sudden, if you go on the internet, there are about 30,000 sites that teach kids how to be vampire and how fun it is, and what kind of, vampire products like so-called blood, or, there's Facebook for vampire. The problem with this isn't, I don't want to really spend too much time with it, is nobody taught us how to deal with it. And right now I have 3 patients who think of themselves as vampires. And again, it will need a whole talk, but some of them will drink their own blood, some they will drink animal blood, and some will want somebody else's blood. And the more you drink blood, it's the same thing. The chemicals in blood get you addicted to it, so you can't stop. And I've never been trained how to do this, what to do with these kids. So I'm learning as I'm going, but it is a significant problem that is happening. Those 3 are the extreme that I'm dealing with. But I know hundreds of kids that are part of that culture, and sooner or later they will become to that stage. And if you notice anything in your household or somebody you know, don't wait until they get to the stage where it's too late for us to get them back, because it is a significant problem. Eating disorders, and this is another issue that I wish parents would understand, that no kid wakes up one day and say, I will become anorexic. It is no different than you wake up and you're diagnosed with cancer. Essentially, these are kids, especially the anorexic, who have distorted body image. They can be 60 pounds and they look at the mirror and they see an elephant. That's how it's not a choice. And that leads to all the problems, you know, the not eating, the vomiting, and all that issue. So, of course, the more, you know, more countries now are banning underweight models and things to try to change the culture, because that has an effect. It contributes to increased perception or weight perception problem. But this is really what these kids see. The kid is skin and bones, and she looks and thinks that she's rounded or heavy or overweight. And it is not, she's not lying. This is what she actually sees. But what that does is that a lot of these kids will have depression. A lot of them will be scared from doing anything social. Lots of obsessive compulsive disorders in these cases. And a lot of them will have self-harm behavior. And that's one thing any of you who is involved in the school system know. Self-harm behavior is getting, I've never seen as much as I'm seeing today. And I've been working with teens for almost 30 years now. And self-harm is not an attempted suicide. That's one thing we need to understand. These are kids who are suffering, who are feeling bad, and think of this as a coping mechanism. This is the only thing that can help me relieve the pain, the anguish, the whatever. A lot of these kids have history of sexual abuse or being bullied or can't get along with their parents, or there is something going on in their life that they find nothing works except causing physical pain. And when they cause physical pain, they feel better. And I go back to what I was telling you about the choking game. It's the same mechanism. When they cause physical pain, they dump endorphin. The more they do it, the more addicted to it they become. And so they start doing it once every 2-3 months, then more frequent, and then at some point they can't function unless they cause some self-harm. Problem with that is a lot of kids don't know what's fatal and what is not. Most 15-year-olds, 16-year-olds don't know that taking 2 aspirins will not kill you, but shooting yourself in the head would. They don't. Some of them think that shooting yourself in the head will not kill you, but 2 aspirins will. So when they cut, I had a kid who cut herself right here. And I mean, it was a miracle that she survived, because you know, the jugular, and you have major arteries and veins, or in the thigh around the femoral artery. So those things happen. They didn't intend to die, but they die nevertheless because they were doing something different. And essentially, it can look like anything. They can do it anywhere. Most of them are between teens, and especially first-year college females. This is the most common time we see it, is young girls who go to college in their first year, all these pressures and new things going on. Kids who are substance abusers, who have personality disorders, kids with history of self-mutilations, anybody who has history of conduct problem or anxiety. But many of them will have either history. The most common kids I see, either there's family violence or alcohol abuse in the family, or sexual or physical abuse. And those where I see this the most among them. And basically, I don't want to bore you with all this, but the simplest answer is they do it to relieve the mental pain. They want the physical pain to combat the mental pain. That's the most common answers we do. And there are lots of types of self-mutilation. Some of these pictures are going to be really ugly, so the next slides you might avoid. But this is the most common type, or what's called stereotypical, where the kid will do the same thing over and over, like banging their head on the wall for hours at a time, or biting their same finger or another finger, or burning themselves in the same place multiple times. So that's called stereotypical type. And the next one, like I said, is going to be not, some of them are going to be pretty bad. Then the superficial or the moderate type, where they either pick on their skin or cut their skin or scratch or do anything, and they can do it anywhere. I mean, from full maps to this. And again, the danger is the kids who do it on the inside of the thigh, where you have larger arteries, where you can end up being killed. I will warn you again, the next slide is not a very pleasant one to look at. This is what we call major types, and those are really awful. I mean, these are kids who will cut any part of their body or destroy any part of their body, get to that extreme. All toes, all fingers, destroying your eye. I've had kids, 2 kids who cut their ears. So, I mean, you can see all kinds of things, and it isn't an easy thing to deal with. It's not fun. I will show you this slide just to go back to something I said in the beginning of the talk about if we talk to our kids early and based on science, not based on rumors, we're probably going to do much better. And this is about teen pregnancy, because teen pregnancy is the big problem in STDs in this country. Our rates are 20 folds higher than most countries. So here's what I want to show you, is if you look at the level of sexual activity, that means what percentage of teens are having sex. And if you look at Sweden and look at the United States, essentially the same number of kids, the same percentage, never changed for the last 30 years. The same percentage in Sweden and the same percentage in the US are having sex. Yet, of course, our people here always say, don't talk to kids about sex, don't show them anything about sex because they will do it. Well, in Sweden, it's open market. Everything is talked to, they're told about sex at home, they're taught about sex in the school. Actually, they start in 1st grade, they tell the kids what's a boy and what's a girl. In 3rd grade, they tell them how babies are made. And in 5th grade, they tell them everything about STDs and pregnancies and consequences. And that did not ever increase the number of people having sex. All it did is made them have no problem with either pregnancies or abortions or sexually transmitted diseases. And that always reminds me, when I was 4-year-old, that's 1961, and I was growing up in the Middle East in a village. We were 10 kids living in one room with no electricity, no water, nothing. And I'm with my mom in the fields, and I see donkeys going at it. And I asked Mom, what are they doing? My mom sat down, stopped what she was working. Was not a highly educated woman. She sat down and told me what they were doing, why it's okay for them, but it's not okay for humans to do it in public, and why it's not okay for kids to do it. I never forgot that. And that's what we are missing here. When I came to this state, I wanted to advocate for real sex education, at least in 8th or 6th grade, or just to tell people consequences. What happens if you have sex when you shouldn't? Because, of course, ideally, I would want everybody to be abstinent until they are older. But that won't happen if we keep lying to them, because we can hide all we want to. If you don't talk to them, they're going to ask their friends, and if they don't, then they will go to the internet. I'd rather tell my kid than him finding out on a porn site or somewhere on the internet. And I remember I went to testify to the joint session of the House and the Senate here in Kentucky, and I'm telling them the same thing. And one of the senators got so mad. He said, "Oh, are you crazy? I have a 14-year-old. You want to tell her about sex? She will go have sex." And I stood up really for a few seconds and said, "How do you know she isn't?" He got so mad. It was like I knew if he had a gun, he would have shot me that moment. And then 2 weeks later, he called me for help. She was 14 weeks pregnant. So this is what I deal with every day. It's the same thing like talking about suicide. Oh, you talk to them about suicide, they will commit suicide. Talk about drugs, they will do drugs. No, knowledge is power. And this is, in my book, this is the best proof, because all those countries, in Sweden, in France, they are open about sex. That doesn't mean they are encouraging their kids to have sex. They are just educating their kids about it. And the result is their kids are not having more sex than ours. They are not. It's just the consequences of it here are more than there. And that's the biggest difference I see between us. So we really need to talk with our kids about sex. And we need to talk to them early before they hear it from sources that you don't want them to hear it from. And we need to give them facts, not rumors. When some politician comes and says HPV vaccine is going to cause you brain damage, That's sad. We shouldn't allow this to catch traction because the fact is 7 billion doses of that vaccine has been given. Not a single serious side effect has been described. So there is science and there is rumors. And we have to build teaching our kids based on science, not based on rumors or based on somebody motivated by money or lobbying or something like that. We have to be honest with ourselves first and with them also, because the bottom line is if we can postpone risk-taking, if we can postpone it 1 year at a time, every year we gain, they become smarter. Like in the US, for example, if you look at all the data that the government shares, it's 15 to 19-year-old, because that's very convenient. 15 to 19 are a lot better now than they used to. The problem is now what we are doing with the under 15. Like teen pregnancy between the 15 and 19 age group is going down. Not good enough, but it's going down. But nobody talks about the under 15, which is going through the roof. The youngest teen mom I had was 10 years and 8 months when she had a baby. That means she got pregnant before her 10th birthday. We can't afford to wait for these things and just pretend that, okay, now they're 15. But postponing things, if we can keep them safe till they're 16, 17, 18, 19, the more we keep them safe, the better success we have. And we need to communicate with them in an honest, straightforward, not like this. These are real road signs in the US that I love photographing road signs. And if you look at these road signs, this is what our kids are seeing from us. The dad is yelling at them not to do drugs, and there is his stash of pot under the bed. The mom is talking about phone use, and she is stuck on the phone 24 hours. We can't do these type of communications. We have to communicate in this way. Basically, here's my tips to you about how to handle your kids, either as a parent or if you're a professional, how to talk to teens about anything. Whenever you talk to a kid or ask him something, try to understand rather than what's the truth. Your truth is completely different than his or her truth. So try to be understanding, not judgmental. Pay attention when the kid is telling you something if the verbal language is different than the body language. This is what I teach my students and residents. No teenager is going to come to the clinic and say, I'm here today because I'm thinking about killing myself tonight, or because I think I'm pregnant. They will come and say, I have a headache. And they're waiting for us to ask them the right questions. And that's the biggest problem in US healthcare system. You take them to the emergency room because they told you they have a headache, and the emergency room will spend hours doing CTs and whatever. Nobody bothers to ask them questions, because that's what is important. Almost every kid, 80% of kids who commit suicide will go to 5, 6, 7 different doctors, hoping that somebody's going to ask them how they feel. And nobody does, because everybody's focused on that. So look at their verbal language. If they're telling you something, but their eyes are telling you, I'm really interested in something else, keep asking until you figure it out. Again, listen for understanding, not for the truth. And then, how do we respond to something the kids say? Because, let me give you an example. You have say a 15-year-old girl, she comes home and she's crying her head off and tells her mom, that's it, my life is over, my boyfriend dumped me, I'm never gonna have another boyfriend. And what's the standard answer any mom gives usually? I mean, I don't wanna say 100%, but 90% of the time the moms go, oh, don't worry about it, you're gonna have a lot more, and there's another fish in the sea, or whatever she comes up. To this 15-year-old, she does not have abstract thinking. She does not understand tomorrow. She just, now, her life is over. She will never have another boyfriend. And when she comes home and tells you that, and you belittle it and make it sound like it's no big deal, next time when something else is going on, she's not going to come share it with you. And that's the biggest disconnect between parent and kids. Now, just turn that over and imagine if this mom said, I am sorry, honey, what can I do to help you? Let's go sit down and commiserate together or do something together. I'm not going to leave you alone till you feel better. 5, 6 hours later, things are better. And next time there's a problem, she'll come talk to you. And that's the biggest message I advise parents to do. Like I always tell my son since he was 2 is, I'm going to get mad when you do something stupid, but I will never punish you for it if you share it with me. You know, you do something, or you need something, you come talk to me about it, we'll talk it over, I'll be mad, I'll be upset, but I'll still help you out through it. But if you don't tell me, there's nothing I can do about it. And I'm never gonna belittle what you tell me. And I learned that because at some point, not just working with him, but raising a teenager. When he was 11, one day I think I was working 36 hours, and I went home really exhausted. He was a very bright kid. He was doing computer programming since age 4 or 5. And he's waiting for me and so excited that he just designed a new computer program and want to show me. And I said, I'm really tired. Can we do it some other time? And I see his eyes just like light is being turned off. And that's when it hit me. No. So I said, no, forget it. Let's go look at it. Because until today, I'm positive if I went and didn't look at it, in his 11-year-old mind, it would have been, what's important to him is not important to me. And that's what we don't want to tell our kids. We want to give them the other message, is that we need to reflect their emotion, to be concerned about what concerns them. Legitimize their feeling. Don't belittle them. And express support for them, because that's what your goal is, to have them comfortable coming to you next time. That's what you want more. I had a 16-year-old kid I was consulted on who was admitted for attempted suicide. So he just turned 16. He has both parents are highly professional, doctorate degrees, very rich. They bought him a Corvette for his 16th birthday. And he tried to kill himself that same night. So I'm talking to him after we stabilized him, and basically his words rephrased were something like, it's great to have a Corvette, but it's more important to have a dad. And that's what dads need to know and moms need to know. The kids, yes, they appreciate all the material stuff, but you know what? Every now and then, talk to them, do something with them. Go out on a weekend, even if they say, most of them, they will say no or not sure, but if you actually do it or offer it, they will do it because they want it. Most parents don't hug their kids. You can't imagine how many kids come to me in the clinic one day and say, I'm here just to get a hug today. That should not happen. They don't want you to baby them in public, but every now and then they do want to be hugged. And they want to feel loved, not just, when they see you just on your phone or reading your newspaper, they think it's too much or too late. All right? So a lot of it, for those of us who are professional, also, we can't treat everybody equally. Like a student would go in the room, and one of my residents asked a kid, do you go to church every Sunday? And the kid looked at him and said, I'm Jewish. You can't assume that somebody is like that. So, or that somebody is gay or straight or sexual and ask him, you have a boyfriend or a girlfriend. So we have to understand all these things. Because the bottom line is, don't lecture the kids. If you lecture them, this is how they look at you. Doesn't matter if you say what's on the right or what the left, they ignore you completely. And when they're talking to you, don't pretend to be listening. Actually listen, because this is what our kids do. That they tell me that their parents are pretending to pay attention or to listen, but they're not listening. And that's not a good thing. So I'm going to skip a few things here, but you have them on the handout. You are welcome to email me. This is the link to that documentary that talks about teen issues and what do teens need, and it addresses Gene's program and other programs around the state who are doing a really great job in helping teens. And we really have to start thinking and believing that kids are not a problem to be solved. They are a big resource that we need to develop rather than a problem to be solved. Our 32nd president figured this out long time ago. We would have done fine if we had listened to him. We cannot build the future for our youth, but we can build our youth for the future. And this is what we need to do, is really build our youth for the future. Thank you.